So I'm here to briefly introduce Konstantinos and Marianna, Point Supreme. I mean, again, they are here, of course, because we appreciate very much the work they do. And then we would like to hear them as much as we can, of course. And the second reason is because is the reason why we have compiled the list of guests for this Leçon du Mardi, which is made mainly by people we invited also at the What is Ornament exhibition in Lisbon, and we feel, but we will discover this during the conference and the presentation, why their work is so much related to that, at least to our eyes. Maybe this is not what they think. I don't think so. I don't think so at all, but okay. While as they accepted to participate to the exhibition, I think that they recognize. I think that's again, I mean, I would let the presentation start, and I will leave a little bit of time afterwards. Again, I know, and this I invite, now there is Thibaut here active. So Thibaut, you will do the first question. Now I generally talk to students because students, we would like a bit of question from your side. I mean, that's normal. I mean, we already had a couple of lectures now. We did ours. Richard did his own lecture. Now that the moment arrived, the third lecture is the moment to break the ice and to do at least 3 questions to the guests. Why so? Because we have the chance to have them here with us, explaining their work. It's not so close at the end, even more close than a real presentation, because we can speak one-to-one like this. So I mean, use this occasion to know a little bit more. I mean, to give space to your curiosities, because I think the work of Point Supreme architects really, how to say, can provoke a lot of questions, interesting ones, and that's why we like to have them here. So I will leave to you, Marianna and Konstantinos, the word. The idea is that there is nearly 1 hour like this with a little bit of questions, yeah, which we would appreciate to have them, and yeah.
Okay,
it's yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the presentation will Konstantinos will do the presentation, but I will be for the questions after from your side.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting us. First of all, thanks Giovanni for your kind words. I must say that in relation to the question of ornament, like you suggested, we do absolutely feel engaged with it. And also have to say that it was you guys posing the question for the Lisbon Triennale, that it was the first time that made us think about it consciously, because of course it's a theme that runs through our work, but we never sat down to think about it before. So it has been very interesting and very constructive to do so. And about the questions, indeed, I encourage you guys, the students, mostly to feel comfortable enough and ask any question or discuss anything afterwards. It will be very interesting for us to hear your thoughts. You can hear me well, right? Okay, so let me share the screen to show you the presentation we prepared for today. So the question is, what is ornament for us? We're gonna show you mostly parts of our work that we think address the question or answer the question in some way or another, and we're gonna show you also some references or some things that have been influential to us, because they also relate with the question and the theme of ornament. To start, I will show you here some images from some of our Athens projects, urban proposals for our city, which is also the first period maybe of our office before we started to have real work or construction work. So at that time we were looking at the city and doing proposals to improve it or to change the way we look at it and think about it. And the reason I'm showing this in the context of the ornament question is because the ornament question is already valid here or present here because these projects in the end were reasons for observation. So what was happening was that we were observing the city and distinguishing things that matter, things that are important, things that stick out, or things that could stick out, things that could add value and difference to the experience of the city. So in a way, the proposals worked in that direction. For example, if we look at a specific proposal, renovation of a square, most of the project had to do with choosing the space and using the context, the buildings around as part of the proposal. For example, here it's this building in the middle is one of our favorite modern buildings in Athens. It's completely unnoticed today, but it has a very strange, beautiful green glass. It's the post office building. So the proposal was also trying to put attention to it. So about observation and about hierarchy. Another project that had to do a lot about observing what matters, what's different, what's beautiful, what could happen, what the possibilities are, is this project, which is called the 100 Views of Acropolis, which was documenting frames from the city towards the Acropolis, but mostly revealing differences, things that happen around, of course, the ancient rock into the city. So basically ways that life takes shape and spaces and all these possibilities that lie in the modern city today. So again, about observation, and even more maybe in this project, which was a tourist campaign called Only in Athens, which was trying to extract, to put attention into the objects of the city or the things, the events, whatever is unique in it. For example, in this case, we were looking at the profile of the apartment buildings that make up the city and using them in the typical or traditional representation, like in the needleworks, like carpets here to the right, replacing columns and temples with it, with this profile. So in a way, these projects also made a jump of scales. From looking at the city, they were coming down to the object, to the building. And that was also very important in the discussion about ornament for us, because in a way, what you will also see in our work, we're trying to bring scales together, and whatever we can discuss under the topic or the term ornament is also a means to bridge different scales, like these projects we're doing. Here we were proposing marble little polykatikias as souvenirs again, so architecture as small souvenir object, or here as well other souvenirs, or here some other urban projects, images, again merging scales. For example, in the second image here we see a project which was called Athens section. So it was showing the section of a building, of a typical, let's say, building, polykatikia, but claiming that it's also a section of the city. So again, it was this merging of scales and this practice of observing. The next image is Athens as an island, also based on observation. Yes, or part of Athens by hills, again observing the importance of the hills into city life and city structure. Observation again. And another project where this merging of scales was happening. So I dare say that the way it was happening was very connected to the idea of ornament. Here in the Biennale models that we made for some of the Athens projects, we were presenting or combining an urban scale image with an object detail. So the two were creating a link, a connection that revealed something else about the project. And the zoom of that. So this is about the urban projects. Again, to conclude, we showed this to you because in these projects already the practice of ornament for us was taking shape without us realizing, and it to do with observing and extracting things that were already there in the city and turning them into a project by highlighting their beauty or their uniqueness, for example. I will get back to this, but now I will jump into a few reference images that are also very important and related to our work, also in the context of ornament. This is a painting by Spiros Vasiliou that we often show. It's a painting of Athens, and for us it summarizes very well it has this combination of exterior space, domestic scale, but also the city mass, the rooftops, the mountain, the sky, the sun, etc. So it's this coming together of these things that make up the city. Or if we look at traditional or anonymous Greek architecture, for example, on islands or in the mountains, we see spaces that are, of course, not designed by architects, but made by their inhabitants. And again, you see this merging of scales that we're so interested in, where it doesn't matter what is architecture and what is furniture or object, or what is a detail and what is a big dimension or a structural element. Everything becomes the same, equal. There's no hierarchy anymore. And so this is very important for us for the topic of the question of ornament, because you cannot distinguish between what is functional and what is additional or what is there for aesthetical purposes. Everything is connected. More examples from Greek interiors or traditional Greek interiors where this merging of scales, or as we see it, happens. You see to the left, for example, wooden construction that is a kind of bedroom with a little kitchenette and the bathroom actually below, but it's also just a piece of furniture. If you think about it, it's not a room in the conventional sense. Also, you see how detailing comes, craftsmanship, and just finishes off everything, but everything is kind of crafted. So it's not that you cannot distinguish between what is detail. There's nothing additional, or everything is additional. The same to the right. A low resolution picture of a house we really admire, the house Takis in Aegina Island, made by its owner, where he was completely hybridizing architecture with furniture and sculpture. And if you look at Greek life, very often it's the same thing, where there's actually even no architecture sometimes. It's really just symbols, people, clothes, the landscape that make up the space and give meaning. So it's interesting to think of ornament here again, because of course everything in this picture is an ornament or can be seen as such, has the same role. The sea, the mountains in the back, the sky, everything participates in a way that is crucial and adds to the beauty of the scene and the meaning of the scene. Some more reference pictures that we find very exciting. This door here in Cafe Neon, local village, old people, old men's cafe, let's say, or traditional cafe, a door like a building, a whole facade. Or a famous house in Athens painted by Tsaroukis, a famous painter. Again, you see the complexity and the richness of this architecture, which is merged together with the whole scene around it. Festivities happening in the water in front of the city participating again, the city giving the background, the scenography for it, or random details on ferry boats, again creating form or beauty, meaning, but also function. So ornament as an equal thing to functionality. That's about the references. I will jump into some projects again, but this time constructed projects. So mostly interior projects, in fact. In the question of ornament, what I want to show here, or what I want you to think about here, is again the mix of scales. So how ornament is used as a tool to make this bridge between different scales, like we saw in the Athens proposals before, where the city and the buildings, or the city and the objects, the furniture, became one thing. Here again, these spaces, the project spaces, bring together the scale of the building, or the scale of the room, with the scale of the object and the scale of the detail. They all become one and act together simultaneously without hierarchy, trying to make a kind of microcosm. So trying to blur the distinctions between big and small, important or unimportant, structural or not structural, etc. So this was, for example, our first project, the flower shop, where the whole space was organized through these tables. So the tables became the space somehow. The rest of the space was kind of erased and camouflaged with a blurry image, so that it kind of evaporated, or it wasn't seen anymore as sharply as the tables were. And the tables became one with the plants and the flowers, of course. So the space became the plants eventually. So basically the plants became also the ornament, the thing you look at, the thing that made, the thing that had the detailing, the thing that had importance, the thing that had the meaning. Everything else kind of disappeared. That was the point of it. If we look at a more typical case of a project of ours, so a residential interior like this one, Nadia, you see again this attempt to bridge scales, or to blur scales. So everything treated in the same way. There's no rooms anymore, there's just functions. It's difficult to say what's a function and what's a furniture and what's an object as well. So it's a kind of environment where everything has its own claim in the ornament discussion, in also in aesthetics, in meaning, in importance. A catalog of the different elements that make the space here, the two floor plans to the left. Again, hierarchies have been, at least there was an attempt to get away from hierarchies, to delete rooms and usual distinctions or terminology like that. So everything here, pictures, different pictures from the apartment, where you can see again this attempt that everything became the same, everything became equally important. So a room and a furniture, the stair and a cupboard and a closet, or a filter screen construction, or a window, a door, everything had its own claim in importance. and ornamentation. Or if we look at another example of a project, this was the Iliopoli apartment, the initial condition, a bare semi-basement, a continuous floor, and this was the project after the renovation. Again, an environment of elements, let's say, where every element has its own role. Everything participates again to create this kind of cosmos, this kind of environment, place, with no hierarchy. Sometimes details and elements appear in a small scale, sometimes they appear in a bigger scale, sometimes they're general and sometimes they're concentrated. I think it's fascinating to start realizing these kind of differences. They're very conscious, so maybe it's also a way to achieve this goal of us to use ornament as a tool to define relationships and create oppositions and differences and contrast. So I think by now we do this pretty consciously, that we try to apply the idea of ornament in these different ways, in order to create these different effects and blur the distinctions between what is between hierarchies, between what is structural and what is not, what's important and what is not. But for sure, ornament is brought into the discussion from the beginning. So from the moment the space is being constructed and designed, and it's not something that happens afterwards. Also, very often, ornament or the strategy or the idea of ornament takes place into the margins, into the meeting points where things come together. So instead of hiding or erasing those borders, something new happens there. This is another apartment, a Trikoupi apartment, and a Verena apartment. This is two apartments that we finished pretty recently, but it's the same logic again, the same effort to distinguish differences between things in terms of hierarchy. And here two small rooftop apartments, which are more or less one room. So this is the existing condition of one of them, and this is the proposal, where again you see the same effort. So color and color, texture, detailing, everything tries to play its role. Texture also to create this kind of microcosm. Where also the size of the space is overcome, or that's the ambition, that the space becomes something more than what it actually is. This is the second rooftop, 22 square meters, under construction now. Same effort again to create a different scale in there. So also ornament becomes a tool for that, to blur scales, or the realities of the scale that's there. And to close with these interior projects, an image of an apartment we used to live in. We used to rent an anonymous little apartment in Athens that we realized was already having some of these qualities at play. For example, you see here the kitchen. The kitchen used to be a balcony, so this was a window before, then it became an internal window. Every floor was different, and there was no corridor. So from one floor, one room, you would enter the other. So this kind of differences and the no scale effect was already happening here. It was very fascinating to experience this and realize the effects of it. And it's something that I think we carried in our work later. We learned from it. So I will jump to another category of projects, which is objects, or sometimes objects in the city. So in the problematics of ornament, the reason we collected these ones is because they achieve this merging of scales again, because they're mostly urban projects, but as you will see, they're also just big pieces of furniture. So this is a serpentina. It's a canopy that we did in Tel Aviv. They were asking for shades for public spaces. So the whole project was born from the side of the public space and the city life, what you do in the city, what you need to do to sit, and what else is useful for the pedestrian, for the inhabitant, and how you can accommodate that. But the proposal was a very simple piece of canopy, like a big table made of fabrics, like a big balcony, but sitting on the ground. Or here, the Faliro Pier was also a very urban project, because the question was how to finish a big urban route. It was a competition we won, and the answer we gave was, let's use this to make a big table, a big roof with a shade and a tribune overlooking a ferry boat, another important object for Greece. So it was the idea of making urban space by using big objects. So ornamentation again became, of course, introduced through the object into the proposal, and so into the scale of the city. Another project that did not get built was the circular playground. Self-initiated this time proposition to do a playground in the city, where we try to make one big object by using these small objects that were available, that were supposedly being sponsored to us by a company. So they had these little objects of questionable aesthetics, but surely of not very exciting presence, because the whole city has these playgrounds today. So we tried from these things, using tricks and camouflage, but mostly by changing their scale to come to something bigger, something that would have an urban effect. A mosaic we once did, so taking a graffiti from the city but making an object out of it. Or here the cabinet, a little piece of furniture but conceived as a building, a small skyscraper in fact. That was the way we conceived it. So again, merging scales and bringing the idea of ornament as found in small objects, but increased into this bigger scale. Another object that is very important for the ornament discussion for us is the totems, where we make this as a manifestation of the no hierarchy principle, the idea that the idea of treating things as equal. It's a mirror project to the Petralona house, a build project that we will see in a few minutes. And it's the idea that in that project, there's no hierarchy between what's structural and what's not, what's valuable and what's not, what's decorative and what's not, etc. So everything is brought together in a very democratic way. Everything becomes equally protagonist, equally important part of the whole, of the space, of the result. So these were 3 columns of things placed on top of each other in a very equal way. And a project that was a mirror project of the Totems was the one we did for the Lisbon Triennale, which was this, the frieze, It was a frieze, but made with tiles and door handles coming from the Iliopoli apartment, which was this semi-basement apartment that we saw a few minutes ago. So these were the samples that we got from some closed factories and basements that we shop cheap old materials in Greece, but we always admired their beauty and their quality. They're very good quality, typically, these things. So although they're very cheap and found in sunken basements, it's very interesting to look at their beauty and differences, and that's the way that we use them, by putting them down and trying to control the contrast and the relationships that they form with each other. So this was, in the end, this was the design and the final object as exhibited in the Triennale. So making the claim that one can put together these things and claim that this can be called a frieze, instead of having the marble statues, having found tiles, ceramic tiles. The final project for this category of projects, the objects, is a new one that we're gonna show in the Venice Biennale soon, in the Belgian pavilion. It's based on this painting by Spiros Vassiliou, the painter we showed you earlier with the mountain. So this is the project. It's called The Way We Live Together, Athens. It's a kind of portrait of Athens, or better, a reading of Athens, where again the scales are merged, and we try to show as equal pieces of the city and pieces of its architecture, but also the objects that make it, because it's a way very similar to the way we design and the way we build our work. So it's very engraved into our thinking, because the way we do the work is that we find the elements and we compose them by controlling their relationship. So into this picture, of course, you can see here to the left the Petralona house facade, because largely this neighborhood is the neighborhood of Petralona, because the painter used to live close here. So it's the same to abolish the differences of the scales and to show the things as equal. So the final chapter, the final project I'm gonna show you today is the Petralona house, this house that we saw before. You saw the Totems, the mirror project of it with the different elements and the materials that made it. Let me check the time. Okay. In this house, the question of ornament is extremely present for various reasons that I hope you will see soon. The house was made largely with sponsorships and reclaimed things that were found and recycled in junk yards, so places where you can buy pieces from former buildings. For example, this balcony here that we see is from a former neoclassical building, and this window here is a typical island window. These wooden shutters and this window here to the ground floor are from the existing house, I mean the former house into the plot, whose perimeter we also kept. So the whole ground floor has the shape of the former house. Some zooms and drawings of that project. So what you can see here is that, first of all, is that everything enters the discussion of ornament, we can say, because as you see to the left, the floors, and to the right, two sections or internal elevations, as we call them more often here. You see that the different elements and objects of the house were introduced from the beginning. So this is actually one of the first drawings we did for the house, was this section up here with the concrete, where the different objects that would arrive to the house were already introduced. And some of them were literally taken into consideration in the concrete. So here, for example, there was this space was made dimensioned to host this hanger furniture, or here, for example, where the shelves were in the bedroom. Or to the left, you see that some found or sponsored materials were used in a graphic way, so that the floors themselves started to participate in the discussion about aesthetics, about ornament, about meaning, referencing typical Athenian or island interiors or floors or spaces, but doing so in dialogue in combination with the other elements in the house, as you see here down to the section, such as the furniture, like the kitchen here, or facades, like this back facade with the graffiti up here, or elements like the tree and the shelf for frames, pictures here, or a place for plants up there, etc. So you can see here a collection of pictures of the house, old pictures when it was a bit empty still. But you see, I hope what we're trying to show you with this lecture actually, that ornament is in our work is an idea or a tool used to define relationships and to create oppositions and contrast, and it is applied not additionally. It's not something that comes later into the project, but it's something that happens from the very beginning, as you saw in the drawings just before. And also it's something that doesn't have a specific scale, like often maybe ornament implies. It's not something that's small, but it's something that maybe is bigger than anything else. Sometimes the whole project is the ornament, like this facade does to the neighborhood. These were some of the references used in the Petralarna house, where you see again ideas from islands or typical Athenian houses with an effect in the idea of ornament again applied into the house. So volume also into this discussion of ornamentation. The pictures of the junkyards and the materials that were found and used. This is a chair leg, for example, that we used as a column here into a piece of furniture. And finally, to close also with the Petralarna house, I want to share with you a few spreads from a recent article that is very interesting maybe for you to look in the context of ornament as well. It was an article published in the Doma Greek magazine, Greek but bilingual, also in English. It was an article co-edited by us in 51 and 4E, who looked at the house, or proposed to look at the house under the framework of the work of Christopher Alexander and his patterns. So Christopher Alexander made a book once where he talked about architecture, defining about 250 topics, which he called patterns. And Frek and Soteria from 51 and 4E realized that one could see a lot of these patterns into the house. So we made this article with a selection of about 15 of those patterns or topics that described the house, and more specifically the process of design of that house. And the reason I'm showing this to you is because, of course, it's very related to the idea of ornament as well. And in fact, one of the last patterns was ornament. So these were some of the spreads that had to deal with, for example, the idea of building your own house yourself. So making it personal, or for example, to use different heights, which is something extremely present into the house. So again, volume into this discussion. Doors and windows and floors. Floors, I talked to you briefly about the floors and the different meanings that the different floors have? Even plants and flowers into this discussion. And this was finally the spread about ornament. Yes, where Soteria and Freck were writing that ornament becomes a strategy of turning the building into a universe of its own. Also a tool for making joy and playfulness and arising curiosity. So ornament as a means to do that. And here we put a page from the book of Christopher Alexander in the chapter of ornament, where he was, one of the things he was already talking about was something we mentioned in the beginning in this lecture, that it's interesting to think of ornament as something that happens not on something, but as something that happens between things, at the border of things. So establishing the relationship between things. This is, I think, or at least we try, that happens in our work. So ornament as something that brings things together or defines their relationship. And ornament as a tool, as a means to do that. That's it from visuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Konstantinos and Mariana. That's always great. Before doing my own question, which I have, of course, as I have to negotiate 5 minutes of silence because there are works at home, so there is it might restart us immediately. Maybe I leave the space for the other questions before I go to negotiate 10 minutes of silence, and I come back for my question in a second.
Okay.
Please, questions.
Yes, we'll be happy to hear your thoughts. I think it's going to be interesting for you to also to try to take a position or verbalize what your feelings are.
Maybe I have a question, just to start the conversation and maybe to extract some comments from also the students. Thank you so much, Konstantinos, for this presentation. Thanks to Mariana, I know she's around, so thanks to you too. Also, thank you to Giovanni and Ambra for organizing such talks inside school. It's very important for us to hear people from you. Yeah, I had the chance to follow the 2 lectures, so it's very rare to hear people 2 times within 2 weeks. So now I had a question at last lecture, but I forgot to ask it. So it's great to have you again. My question, or maybe a comment or something to start the conversation, would be maybe about the language, something which is around the language, the architectural language. We all know that we just celebrated Lacaton and Vassal's work a few days ago about, let's say, the economy of means, the economy in a very large scale and everything. So that was a very huge message for me to the world. And I think it's very important for us to have this in mind. And listening to you too, I realized that you also deal, but with another way, with the language and with the, maybe in the way you manipulate objects, like you said, borrowing principles and methods to surrealism. So let's say that the manipulation, you are kind of not totally aware of what's going to happen with the object that you manipulate, like one surrealist would say. I also think that I also believe that you also, let's say, overpass and deal with this question through ornament of the language. So that was maybe not a question, but a comment.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm clear.
Yes, you're clear. Yes, I think it's a very interesting theme, first of all, to bring language into the discussion, because we're, of course, here to talk about the question of ornament, and you're bridging it to language. And I think it's a very crucial word. And I think that in some way, what I showed you, what we prepared for you today, is a very clear attempt to create a language. I think that's what you're saying, and I think it's true, or at least it's a name. There is a language formed, and I think probably, and that's maybe what's an interesting answer in relation to ornament, that probably as soon as you start defining a relation to ornament, probably a language is born by that. So the two are very linked. I think that's what you're aiming at.
Can you elaborate the language?
The language, me?
Yes.
Thibaut should elaborate on language, not me.
Me?
Yes, I just wanted to hear from what do you here?
What I mean by
Yes.
using the word language.
Maybe well, let me rephrase the question, maybe, or maybe just to. It's just that when I was talking about Lacaton Vassal, I was talking about first about the celebration of economy, and I know that you have a very important relation to economy. That was how I was linking the actuality of the world to Point Suprême, let's say, and beside this, beside the actuality of celebrating economy that also you do every day. I think there is also a crucial discussion about language. When we talk about Lacaton and Vassal, they also very kind of contour or overpass the question of language through the economy of means. And this is kind of leverage, let's say, to let's say overpass the language. And what I was, and if I get back to your work, I'm just trying to say that, to me, the way you deal with objects through, let's say, junkyards and the as-found object and everything is another way to kind of overpass the question of language and to, as a surrealist, let's say, and you bring another way, in another way, the question of language through, let's say, the surrealist method.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I was thinking about this relation to the work of Lacaton Vassal because I was looking at some of the pictures last week, of course, that were circulating. And I also read the chapter that maybe you posted somewhere. I saw it somewhere that said, I think it was Monsieur Vassal that was saying that their projects are not complete and they get completed as soon as the people move in, which is of course what happens, what you see in the photos, and that's the whole point, right? So that it's they make these empty shells very economical and extremely functional, of course, but then they also accept and expect the life that will enter. And the difference with what we do, I think, is that we try to introduce the life already in the beginning, and we try to take it into consideration, perhaps because our work is so much smaller and specific, and I don't know, anyway, that's the way we work. And I hope that that's something that was carried through the talk today, and it has to do a lot with the merging of scales, because architecture, of course, has a scale, right? The building has a scale, it's something big, and life has a smaller scale. Life is smaller because it's the people and the objects. And what we do, or what happens in what we do, is that because we introduce the objects from the beginning and we make it part of the architecture, the two come together. Of course, like Thibaut says, this is all coming from surrealism, or this is things already existing in surrealism. This merging of scale between things and blurring of differences or of borders, of lines, is there, right? So it's all connected. These things.
I have one question. You said that the opportunity that Giovanni and Ambra gave you to talk about ornament in Lisbon made you think about it consciously. But what I always found very interesting in your work, and especially when you started, or at least a few years ago when you got well known, at least in France, is the question of color. You have a very, very colorful work, and maybe 10, 15 years ago, color wasn't such accepted or a subject in more contemporary architecture. Mm-hmm. And since the subject is ornament, I was thinking about the fact that, of course, you're from Greece and there's a huge heritage of ornament, if not like the birth of it. And now we look at all the Parthenon, all these monuments, which are now white, and some of them, at least the columns and some part of them, used to have colors. And you address now this question of heritage with your first projects, for example, the little objects for tourists, which are very, very interesting. And I was, my question finally is, in what extent and how consciously color is a subject in your projects?
Yes, of course, color is very evident, I guess, in our work. And well, for us, color is a tool, is one of the tools that are available. And in fact, it's a very affordable tool. So in some of the first projects that we did that were completely no budget projects, we found ourselves working with color because it was simply one of the things we could work with. In fact, it's very funny because two of our first projects used color as a strategy, but in fact they were colorless. So the flower soup was white completely, and the 6 dogs was black and white, highlighting the garden in the back, the secret garden in that case. But still, I mean, so I'm saying this because it's interesting to think that we started to use color not for its pluralism or for its possibilities, endless possibilities, but just for its just as a strategy, for its strategic potential. But soon after, of course, yes, we did find ourselves using color a lot, but we try to think, and we try to say sometimes, if we discuss about this question of color, that we try to use color not as color, not simply as color. We see color as an experience or as a career of difference of character. So we try to find things and use things, one of whose properties happens to be color, but we're equally interested in that property as we are into its decorative details or construction method or texture or age, you understand? So, for example, I have a clear case in my mind. If you remember the 2 rooftop apartments that we showed you, the first one was very blue, if you remember. It was that one, just one room. In that room, because it's so small, it's shockingly small. It's really a whole apartment as one room. So what we tried to do was collect things that had kind of a blue property, but had different time aspects to them. So very old, very new, wooden made, custom made, or simply painted, painted with different ways. So so maybe the color is the same in that case, but the rest of the properties of those materials and items was different. Okay, so this was a very long circle, but
yeah, actually, it's funny because during the lecture, I was trying to choose colors for one of the apartments of Konstantinos, so one of the small apartments. Actually, color started as the only tool we had because we were doing very economical, very cheap, let's say, apartments. So we started painting them in order to put hierarchy in the spaces. And actually, that's why now we are also choosing colors for the windows in order to at least give the minimum experience of being in a blue window or in a lemon window or this kind of things. And then this will later realize that the color is not enough because the client could easily change it. So then we jumped into choosing materials instead of colors to impose them in a way. But I think the most interesting thing in our work is that we designed the whole space together with the color. So if one color changes in one corner because the client doesn't like it, we have to see the whole apartment or the whole space again from the beginning, because it's the relationship of color that matters to us and not the color itself.
Mm-hmm. So interestingly, sometimes we've used color, even in our own house, we've used colors that we don't like because we think they work best with other colors. So the relationships they make, we find successful.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I wonder if there are questions from the public before it's not correct that we hijacked Mariana and Konstantinos for questions. Yes, still today difficult to break the ice. At a certain moment I will, and this is a course, it's not only a cycle of lectures. So next time I'm gonna pick by we will do a lottery for questions.
Good idea.
That's what we do. Yeah, really. We do this, choose a name, and
but guys, just do a question, doesn't matter. It have to be very intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, you have the most friendly architects in front of you in this moment. Really.
He means me.
Yeah. I'm not talking about Thibaut. Huh? I'm talking about. I'm joking. I might have a question. I mean, I have maybe some comments, many questions that, and a lot of background noise, by the way, in this moment. So, yeah. First of all, I mean, when I saw the article you wrote together with 51. Yeah, when I see house made of patterns, why not rewriting this article, considering patterns not as protocols like in the Christopher Alexander way, but really as patterns, which is not really. I mean, they're both patterns, but patterns as we also, I mean, which in French is motif or pattern, which you use a lot also in your architecture. So this would also be nice. I think that to make it even more radical as a reading, to imagine this house as a sum and a cross, somehow cross volume made of different patterns. So it's yeah, that's just a comment that while I was listening to you, because I mean of course we could have. I think that we could have put your work in almost all the categories of our show, our exhibition in Lisbon. One of those was patterns, but I think that your way of doing, your way of looking at the city, your way of looking at life, really could fit indeed in the topic. I mean, we put your work in your frieze in the molding chapter, but I mean, we could have talked about color in the wall chapter. We could have talked about columns, of course. We could have talked about patterns, for sure, and for sure we could have talked about this last chapter called fireworks, where really ornament almost exploded and became something. Which is really relative to the life of the people, to fashion, to something which appears and disappears 2 seconds later. So I think that's in what you show today, you show somehow a sort of full body of work which could somehow enter in all the different corners that we have, the different rooms that we have a matter of understanding of narration created for this exhibition. So yeah, maybe there's not really a question. It's rather a comment.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, maybe another comment that I had is that again, while we were doing the little book about ornament in which there is an image by you, and we were looking at even today in the presentation some of the samples, part of the frieze that you do in order to combine materials, and then we look at a plan of your apartment. They're almost the same. I mean, it's incredible how a composition of 3-4 pieces of material, and then you see the plan. They really look the same. I mean, if you look at from a certain distance, they are the same object. So I think there is a nice reflection about the scale on one side, which is, I mean, your scale goes directly from the city in the territory, like the view of Athens, to the molding, the composition of different materials. Then also to the way of working, which is where the collage is. I think the collage of as found material plays an important role. This is again not really a question, but if you want, maybe I'm totally wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is very very consciously a goal, like we try to show in the lecture, but it's also something that happened subconsciously. Maybe I didn't say this very clearly, but because our office started to work with Athens projects, and in fact because we are trained as architects and urban planners, but we ended up doing small projects and interiors very much, and we had never done any interior project in our studies or our previous work life. What happened is that the thinking of the city was transplanted into the interior. So I think it's something that we started to notice, and then we started to do it more consciously because it was fascinating. So this kind of relation between the object and the floor plan or the apartment, and the city and the apartment, is something that we are also very interested in. And we try to do it in different ways. For example, there was the Totems project, which was linking an object to the house, the Petralona house. Or recently there was this painting we did of Athens, which is doing it in a kind of elevational way. There are a lot of these projects. The whole category we show today called objects. For example, also the circular playground was doing it, or the Serpentina, the canopy, also was doing it. The Serpentina canopy, for example, in Tel Aviv, is like a singular balcony from Athens with its sunshade, but replicated a million times to create lines in the city. Anyway, so there's different ways of reading of these couples, this dualism, which are we find very fascinating as well.
Maybe one last question. I was wondering, of course, you build in Athens and in Greece, and we all know the history of architecture is very important there. I was wondering if, of course, in your projects, we see a lot of freedom regarding colors but any decision. That's how I feel about your projects. And I was wondering if the history of your country feels more like a burden in terms of regulations and of people's perceptions and dialogue with the clients, or is it like more of a tool?
Both. I think it's both. There's a lot of aspects that are a burden, but if I talk with colleagues and friends abroad, working in Belgium and France and other places, then I realized, wow, we have so much freedom as well here. So some aspects are difficult and some not, but I guess the point is to invent your own strategies, to use all kinds of limitations and burdens as a point of inspiration or a tool.
But I think that the history that you are mentioning, it's not Acropolis or the Parthenon, but I think it's the vernacular architecture in Greece. And the fact that there is so much complication and so much sculpture and so much richness, let's say, through, decisions of simple people that take them only for functional reasons, let's say, and because things are happening also during the time, and the only thing that they want to do is to have an economy of means, like you said, but also a functional result. At the end, the result is actually very, very interesting. And for us, this is the most important source of inspiration, let's say. And I don't know if there is, I don't know in other countries, but in Greece, this is very, very present. And because we don't have so much modern, we don't have modern architecture or important buildings in Greece, it happened very naturally that we take our inspiration from what we see in the streets, in the islands, in the villages. So we never say, oh, this is ugly. Oh, wow, this is not aligned. Oh, yeah, this doesn't have a rule, but we try to absorb what is interesting in what we see. And I think this is actually our main, let's say, skill, I would say.
So basically, Mariana, you're saying that it's more of an advantage. We see it more like an advantage and an inspiration than a burden. And I think you're right. It's true.
And I think that the freedom that you mentioned, that we are quite free as architects, this is also an advantage, I think, because we never say to the client, oh, you cannot do that, or this is not architecturally, let's say, correct. So we try to, to combine the architectural correct with what the client wants. So, and then the result is, as we said, very free. We enjoy it very much because, it's unexpected.
Do I have a minute for one more question, Claude? Yeah, okay. No, about hierarchy, because like I said, I followed the 2 lectures. So last time you were talking about, the observations you make of Athens since a while now, because you live there, but also because you went there and went back and everything. And you said, like, let's say you sum up at some point, maybe I'm wrong, but you summed up the city as a succession of dominoes buildings, maybe, if I am correct,
yes,
roughly. And now you say that there is no hierarchy when you do a renovation or a building. I just wonder, maybe 2 questions. Don't you think that there is something that comes before ornamentation in most of the projects? Like if the ossature domino was, let's say, the frame or the canvas also of the projects. And then inside this canvas, you make the collages and assemblage and everything and manipulate objects. And then through this manipulation, raise the idea of ornament. Or what if you want, so that could be one question. And do you think that the lack or maybe the no hierarchy principles could also be true in bigger scale projects?
If we could apply the no hierarchy principle in bigger scale projects, you said.
Yeah. Like for instance, you were doing, because the project you were doing in the not transformation and renovation of apartments. Beside this, do you think that this absence, this no hierarchy is still possible on bigger projects?
For me, it's a little bit abstract, the discussion like this, because we need to define what hierarchy means. Because the way I understand what you say, or what I think from what you say, is that in the urban projects, or at least in Athens, usually it's the opposite thing that happens, because the city has not enough hierarchy. we try to introduce hierarchy. So the urban projects mostly. You only talk about the grid, but when you say hierarchy, you only talk about the domino?
I'm talking about when hierarchy, because you talked about hierarchy when at some point I noticed, I'm sorry, if I try to quote, but I don't know where I put it. But the fact that in the project that you showed today, you say you kind of overpass the hierarchy, manipulating different elements, and there is no structure or no structure or ornament or no ornament. There is no this kind of categorizations of the objects. And last time you were expressing the city of Athens with this kind of multiplicity of dominoes grid. And I just wonder if still there is, the egg before the chicken, and what's come before what. And in that way, I'm just kind of concerned with this idea of hierarchy. Clearer? No, not really.
Yeah, it's a difficult question still.
Well,
because
maybe there is no answer.
Well, for me, it's easier to talk with examples. So, for example, I have a project that we are doing now with 51N4E, which is it's a complex for artists and exhibition space. And of course, the main project is about the organization and putting hierarchies about the spaces, etc. But I realized that as a point supreme, let's say, we have, because we introduced many different scales, like the big scale of buildings, but then the smaller scale of specific spaces like a cafeteria or a kiosk, blah, blah. Then I think that we try to introduce the non-hierarchy of the experience of non-hierarchy to a specific moments if we're talking about an urban project. I don't know if it makes sense. Because in urban projects, and especially if it's collaborations, it's very difficult to apply our thoughts, but we try, let's say, to introduce them strategically, so that you also have the experience of this microcosmos, but of course you cannot do it in the whole thing. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yes, to me.
Yeah. Any question by the students? Because I think that otherwise we have to slowly close, unluckily, the conversation, because we have a specific time frame. Last occasion, I mean, for a question. Okay. Yes. So yeah, next time, new politics about that. That's clear. That's clear. Yeah, I mean, I think that we are. I mean, I have 10 others questions, and but I guess that this also can be part of a hopefully soon discussion we can have live somewhere, Milano, Athens, I would say, because I think that we cannot exploit the. I'm looking at Claude now. We cannot exploit. It's done. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much again from our side for your contribution. I think that's crucial contribution in the frame of this What is Ornament lecture series of Tuesday lecture series, and we're looking forward to the next ones too. Thank you very much again. Really, your work is how to say, it's for us too. When we chose to work on ornament, we were not conscious about what we would have found. So, and we found out also that in asking normally asking to the different offices to work on that, we understood we were making difficult questions, like, let's say, almost self autotherapy somehow. This relation with ornament is not an easy one. So I think that your work is crucial for that, and gives a how to say a very round definition. I mean, without really answering the question, because our task is not to answer that question directly, but it gives a round definition of what ornament is today. So thank you very much, Marianna Konstantinos. It was great to have you here. and I really hope that we can meet soon.
Likewise,
you.
thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.